Welcome to Good Service. We are your hosts, Ben Chung.
And Kevin Haw.
Each week, we'll be having real, raw, and vulnerable conversations about life, faith, and everything in between, and always over a fire meal.
Come grab a chair. Let's eat.
Folks, welcome back to Good Service. We are your hosts, Ben.
And Kevin.
And we have a very special guest and friend in the pod today. We have City Director of Resource Global Los Angeles, whose mission is to teach, mentor, and connect emerging Christian marketplace leaders around the world so they can renew their workplaces and cities for the gospel. We have Charity McLeod in the pod. Welcome to Good Service, Charity. We finally got you in. We tried to get you in last time, and we had some difficulties, but we're here now.
We're here. That's all that matters.
Yeah. We're wrapping up the year. Before we get into the convo, Kevin, what are we enjoying today?
We are having, again, the toss-up from Gardena.
Yeah.
Today we'll be enjoying two salads. We have the buffalo chicken salad. They have a weird name for it, actually, there, but it is a buffalo chicken
Buffalo
sandwich.
chicken. Shout out Buffalo
chicken.
chicken.
Yeah. And then we have the barbecue. They call it the smokehouse over there,
Nice.
salad. And we love this joint because it's healthy and delicious.
Let's go.
So
Let's
we
go.
love it.
All right. So before we get into the food and the convo, Charity, so, I was, checking out what Resource Global does. But I also know you from, we both went to the same church, Reality LA, and you were doing
them.
Did not know that.
Yeah, that's how I
worked for
know.
them
That's
for
how I know
5 years.
Charity.
On staff.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, shout out.
And so impact was the word that came to me as I was praying for you.
Ooh.
And I love what you guys are doing, and I love just kind of like what you do. I always known you to be very vocal about the things that you're passionate about. But as somebody who is passionate about impacting others, the question that I feel like the Lord wanted us to kind of start off on is like what or who impacts you so that you can impact people.
Ooh.
So I
That's a
think
good question.
I feel that's the first bite reflection question. So who or what impacts you so that you can impact people? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
right.
prep my buffalo chicken
Get
salad.
your bite ready. Get your bite ready. And then we're going to do a little bit of air dab.
Yep,
So
yep.
you can try the food.
Okay.
Okay.
Man, that's a good. I know you're not a big fan of buffalo chicken, but I'm a big fan. I love the sauce.
And don't come for me, y'all, because there are some people who would come for me because I don't do the buffalo.
Oh, okay. I won't. No judgment here. No judgment here.
But the barbecue, yes,
Is it
absolutely.
hitting? Is it hitting? Wow.
Good, dude.
I'm so grateful for the mentors that are in my life and have kind of been there my whole life. And the thing about mentors is that I didn't grow up thinking that like, oh, I should seek a mentor. And I think it's by God's grace and his providence that like he's placed godly men in my life. I kind of majority of my childhood, well, not childhood, actually like from like young adulthood to now, I didn't have a father figure. And I think with that, I desired to have somebody to like look up to. And I didn't, you don't realize that when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And God knowing like what I needed was like godly men to father me.
Yeah.
And so I'm super grateful for, the godly men that God's placed in my life. And I still have godly men that I look up to, so I think, those who have impacted me in my childhood to now, I'm super, super grateful for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I can relate to a degree of you saying, you didn't grow up with your father. So my mom actually passed when I was 10. Very suddenly, very tragically.
Wow.
It's interesting because I never really blamed God for what happened, but more so like questioning of or wrestling with like, man, she's not going to be at these very monumental stages of my life. And so knowing that I was going to grow up in different season stages, whether that's coming of age physically as a woman and, dating and graduation and marriage and kids. Like, I think early on, I really did pray for God to bring people, especially women in my life, that could substitute that. And so I think when you say, I never really thought about intentionally asking for a mentor, I never did either. But I did always pray, like, Lord, like, just bring the right women and people into my life to speak into me. And he did, you know, and at the time, my eldest sister and I are actually 21 years apart.
Whoa.
Yes.
It's a big gap.
Big gap.
Yeah.
And I call her my smama, sister mom, because of the age difference. She really could have been my mom.
Right.
And so, you know, she had just graduated USC, started, you know, law, you know, her law practice. And she really stepped in to kind of be the mom that I didn't have, you know. So I think if it wasn't for her, I can't even answer what would have become. So I think that, and just other women along the journey who my mom knew really well and closely came in and kind of stepped in. And so I think definitely, and even still to this day, like, some of those same women are people that I can call and text and reach out to, who still support me and my family because of the relationship and the prayers and the connections that, you know, were there years ago before I even came onto the scene. And so I think God is so good to prepare relationships, not just for ourselves, but I think some of the relationships that we all have are really going to be for our kids later down the line, you know, for their support. And so I definitely think those individuals, as well as just people who, like, are in, we talk about impact, like, have been in kind of the mission space, that were able to draw things out of me that I probably wouldn't have even known myself, you know, through opportunities and, you know, short-term mission trips, etc. So I think God will place people in your life without you even asking sometimes to really kind of draw out of you what you need, whether you realize that you need it or not.
Wow.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Man, I gotta say, like, we're definitely in a table full of folks that did not have, we're all single parent type folks here, because I didn't grow up with a father either, and so there's some strange dynamics there today. But I will say, man, there's been so many people of impact in my life that, just like you were saying, Charity, it just came, right? Like, it's not like I didn't even know how to pray for that. I think, you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, it just happened. And I've been very, very blessed that I think it came much like later for me anyway, because my childhood was kind of rough and crazy. But after that, somehow it's like God knew, like, hey man, this dude needs some mentorship, right? It started with, like, I remember in my career, just men of God would speak into my life. And they wouldn't let me go. And I still remember this one brother of mine that I mentioned before in previous podcasts, and I've told his story many times, but I love any chance I get to say his name, and his name is Alex Kim. And the reason why I talk about this man is he really welcomed me and showed me what hospitality meant in a community setting, where he knew that I was on the outskirts. He knew that I barely wanted to swing by on a Sunday, but he bought me a meal every Sunday. And when I was missing, he would call me and he would go, hey, you should come eat a meal. And he did such a good job of mentoring me into this community that I just learned what it means to be a newcomer from him. You know, he really helped me understand that the newcomer is probably the most important person in the room. Yeah. And he really, really shined a light on that for me. Yeah. And I think that was something that I could never, ever forget. The reason why I love talking about my brother, he passed at 40. So he passed very young. And it was a big loss for a lot of us and our friends and our community. When it happened, it was very sudden. It was like a freak accident type thing. But the impact that he had, I will never forget, because the chapel that we had the service in for the funeral, it was packed to a point where we couldn't even see inside, and there was a line of people surrounding that building. And when the service was held, we just stood outside. We all just stood outside, even though we couldn't hear anything, and we didn't care because we knew that we needed to be there. Yeah. And so I pray that I could be a man of impact like him. You know, I've never seen that many people in one building celebrating someone's funeral before. So that was very impactful.
Wow.
You know, I'm thinking about that. Like, I'm pretty sure Alex wasn't thinking that he was doing anything of like that magnitude by inviting you to meals every week. And that just goes to show that like we have no idea like when we do what we do, like how it impacts somebody, like a meal. You know, like this podcast, you know what I'm saying? We don't know what's happening outside of the thing that like, oh, all I'm doing is this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I like hanging out with this person. I like buying people food or whatever. And I think that's the thing where I praise God that like he gives us passions, you know what I mean? And like, and we were talking earlier too, that like our gifting is not for us, it's for others. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
And not just the gifting, but the experiences. Meaning like the loss of my mother, I can't tell you how many conversations and opportunities I've been able to have because that was my experience of being able to go through that. Now I'm able to connect with other people who have also lost their mothers. And so I think we have to be careful to not discredit even the bad things that happen to us because they are so necessary for people coming behind us.
That's so good. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we were just
That's so good.
We recorded a pod right before this one, and you know, Kevin and I were both saying like, man, we're kind of coming in today with like not the best energy. And it almost made me feel like maybe we shouldn't record a podcast because we're not coming in with the best energy. But we're like, no, let's just do it. Like, we keep saying that this show is something that we feel called to do in all seasons of life and in all moods, like good or bad. You know, we were saying like, you know, Romans 8:28 says like, for God causes all things to work together for his good.
Yes.
And all things means like the good and the bad, the big and the small. You know, what we think are like the most mundane things can be used for God's glory. And
because we think they're mundane.
Right.
My God.
Yeah.
We put mundane
That's
on
right.
it.
That's right.
We put small, we put big, we put happy.
Right. That's good.
You know,
That's good.
We all love a good cup of Joe in the morning. I'm having my cup of coffee before we record every episode of Good Service. So we're proud to announce our episode sponsor, Lucky Bison Coffee, created by my good friend Nat Long. Nat is a Jesus-loving man who started roasting premium coffee beans during the pandemic and started sending it to his friends. And what started out as a pandemic passion actually turned into his business. Every subscription of Lucky Bison Coffee, you'll receive a rotating selection of tasty coffee, either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And if you are a decaf person, it's all good. Nat's got you. Just specify that when you sign up. And each bag of coffee comes with a little hand-drawn zine of brewing instructions that Nat actually draws himself. So log on to luckybisoncoffee.com, and listeners of the podcast will get 25% off their first month subscription. Just enter that code at checkout and get into Nat's Secret Coffee Club. I'm in there. Hope you get in there. Thank you so much, stewards. We love you guys. Peace. Man, I had a conversation yesterday. So I have I've been working with a health coach. Shout out Austin. He's a listener of the pod, and you know, it's so interesting because my relationship with him started as like, oh, he's a coach. So I'm thinking every time I talk to him, you're there to tell me how to like kind of get better, and I won't go into detail, but we had our weekly coaching call, and he's like, how's your week? How's it been? And I'm kind of just telling like the usual conversation. Let me tell you how I've been, my progress here and there, where I'm struggling still, da 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 da. And then our hour was up, so I'm like, okay, I'm thinking like, peace, see you next week. And then he started going into some of his personal stuff. And, I won't go into the detail of it, but then we like talked for like another hour. And the interesting thing was that there was like kind of a role reversal of sorts, because he's telling me his stuff. And it made me like really start thinking about it. I was like, wow, God. And, he's a man of God. And, I'm like, man, Lord, here I am thinking that, this person is supposed to help me. I have nothing to help them with, right? But the cool thing was that, like, I just was like, wow, Lord, here I am now having an opportunity to minister to him. And it was such a dope experience. Not because I felt good about myself, like, oh, cool, I can help this guy out too. I'm like, wow, Lord, I'm looking at this as like, Lord, I have no idea like how you want to use my relationships. You know what I mean? Like the people that come into my life, though they may, I may look at them as a certain way, right? Like you think that your mentors are supposed to mentor you. It doesn't go back the other way. And God can use you to mentor your mentors. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
No,
so like,
seriously.
I've just found that to be like a really cool experience, and that actually like really blessed me. And we prayed together afterwards, and I'm like, wow, God, like look at this. This is not just like a one-way relationship, but this is a brotherhood. This is a friendship. So yeah, I was just really, really blessed by that.
Speaking of mentors and impact, what impacted you to work in the church? And how did that lead to what you're working on today?
Yeah. Interesting. I was working for a nonprofit before I moved into working at the church. But I've always grown up in the church.
Yeah.
And I've always had just a love for it.
Yeah.
I was the kid who was involved in like everything.
Yeah.
Parents were, working for the ministry. So like ministry was was kind of ingrained in me from a very young age.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't want to do corporate. I knew I didn't want to do like a traditional job route. So nonprofit was kind of where I started. And through that nonprofit, I met someone who was working at Reality. And then on the side of working for the nonprofit, I was doing short-term missions.
Oh, wow.
Trips,
okay. Yeah.
Several. And at the time that I came back from the last trip, I had just gotten engaged, and I really believe the Lord was saying, I need you to focus on my city. I need you to focus on home. And I love LA. Love this city.
Are you born and raised here?
Born and raised here.
Yeah,
not too far from USC. And so, yeah, born and raised here, strong ties, roots here. And so as that was happening, I was transitioning out of the nonprofit, and an opportunity came up to where they needed help, essentially. From a volunteer perspective, I'm like, oh, like I have the time right now. I just want to serve. And, I didn't even go to Reality at the time. I just had a friend who was working there and she needed help. And I was like, okay, sure. A lot of the positions that I've had, I've really never applied for after being asked to do the position.
Yeah.
In terms of like formally, like God has always brought me to them through like a personal connection or me just like showing up and helping. Really, that's how I've been, brought to a lot of spaces.
Wow.
And so came there to Reality, served as their missions director for close to 5 years, and then transitioned out of that through a mutual connection of the lead pastor, Jeremy, and him knowing the founder of Resource Global, which is Tommy Lee. And so, and it was interesting because I really loved what I was doing at Reality, but it was just like new baby and, location of where we're living. We're coming out of COVID. They're going back in full person. Like, it just wasn't still the best timing to do that. And so, met Tommy, went to their global cohort gathering, which is really like a key pillar for the organization of all of these cohorts around the world are coming together for 4 days to learn from each other, to have conversations about faith and work. And so, I'm at this gathering and I'm like, this is amazing. Why is this not in LA as one of the most global cities in the world? And it just didn't work out. I won't say work out. It just wasn't the right timing yet.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, well, like I have the time now. I'm at home working remotely. If you need somebody, let me know. And here we are, a year later.
So speaking of Resource Global, and like, what is kind of like the thing that drew you to that and the work that they do?
Yeah, I think one, it is the global piece. To be able to, a lot of my personal growth has been in spaces where I have been able to see an exchange from people that are not like me, come from different backgrounds, different contexts, not just within the US, but across the seas. So I think that's one aspect that draws, that drew me to the organization and the work. But also too, I have been very keen on this concept of cultivating a lifestyle of missions.
Ooh.
Right? Like,
what does that mean?
So when we think about missions, historically at least, I think it can often feel very one-offy. Like missions is like an add-on, right? Like I can go on the missions trip. I could do the service outreach project.
Sure.
I can do all of these things.
Yeah.
But if we're followers of Christ, we should be on mission every single day throughout our entire day.
That's right.
Because that's what it means to follow Christ. And so when we talk about cultivating a lifestyle, like cultivating is tilling and really working, how are we integrating missions into our everyday life? And when you think about where most people take up their time throughout the week, it's going to be at work. And that could be any work, whether that's corporate, whether that's podcasting, whether that's being a mom, like all of that is work. And so how am I showing up in a way that is missional in my everyday space? It's not, after church on a Sunday and I'm going to go and, do this extra thing. It's like, no, like I spend most of my time working with people.
This is actually one of my favorite things to talk about is what does it mean to be missional wherever you go, right? And I don't even think I use the word missional, so I love that you said that because it ties it all in. But because that's what we're called to do. This is the Great Commission. Like, hey, go do this, right? Now, with that being said, I will say it is hard.
Definitely.
And that's why resources are needed.
Yes.
And encouragement is needed. And it's not, I would say, especially the environment, the political environment, the work environment, the HR, the human resource issue, the different rights movements. There's so many things going on that it is a little bit scary, I would say, to be, depending on the level of boldness that you want to carry about Jesus. And I would love to know, as you went to that conference, I'm actually imagining it and kind of jealous for some reason because I want to be there too.
Come to next year.
Yeah, I should. I'm wondering, like, what was about the, I guess, exchange of knowledge and resources and wisdom and experience and all this stuff that you got to witness? What was it that made you go, man, this needs to, besides the fact that, yes, it's a melting pot in LA, there must have been a few things that you were like, man, I learned this and it was so good. Like, can you like recall some of that?
Yeah. I think excellence.
Ooh.
In whatever it is that you're doing.
It's good.
It wasn't at that conference, but it was tied to another Resource Global conference that I went to. And we had Pat Gesslinger of CEO speak.
Yeah.
And he said oftentimes, and I will never, ever forget this. He said oftentimes as Christians, you know, because we are so excited, which is not a bad thing, you know, we want to share our faith. And he said oftentimes we go into organizations thinking that we were hired as Christians to X, Y, and Z for the gospel. Meaning like I'm supposed to go in and share with all of my coworkers, which maybe God is calling you to, but you were hired for the job.
Right. Yeah.
Not to be, you weren't hired because you were Christian.
That's
you
right.
were hired because you had the skills and you had XYZ for this particular position.
Yeah.
So do the position really, really well.
That's right.
And that will open doors
That's right.
for other people to see, man, why is he constantly getting promotions, or why is this happening, etc. Like, how do you do this? It opens the doors because people can trust you because they trust the work that you display.
That's right.
And Jesus
good.
calls us to be excellent in all things.
That's right.
And so I think number one is like what has God called me to, and how can I serve him through how I work?
That's right.
Like
That's right.
every job, even the most what we think is menial positions, it all brings glory to him.
That's right.
And people are always watching.
That's
So
right.
how can I do this job even if I don't want to be here right now? I don't like it right now.
Yeah.
How can I bring him glory through the excellence of my work?
That's so good.
You know, that's so.
That's so
I'm glad that you are talking about missions in this sort of way, because I always think that missions is gospel only, right? You're there to preach Jesus, and I love that. Like you're saying that preaching Jesus can also look like just by how you live. Not that it's always or it has to have the gospel. Like we live the gospel. The gospel is in us. And, you know, the Bible says that faith without works is dead. So then, like, what is the works, right? Like, it's what we do on our day-to-day. It's how we show up in our workplaces. And, you know, when I even think about the way that Jesus operated, like, he loved on people. He fed people, you know. He, like, just lived life with them. And then he said, follow me. You know what I mean? So, like, if Jesus wasn't, like, living out the gospel, like, and if it was just, like, preaching,
Right.
you would be like, well, why would I follow that? Like, I don't know what this is all about. And then he showed it by how he lived. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's so interesting that you say that. When we think about, like, you know, you've heard visual learner, auditory learner.
Yeah,
you know,
that's me.
I think when we look through the Bible, we see all of those different forms. Everybody doesn't learn just through auditory.
Yeah.
And God knew that. So he had to like show us through models and experiences of what it looks like, because a lot of us need to see a model. And so I think keeping that in mind, like, yeah, we can't just talk about it, especially in an age now where everyone talks about him, right? So like, how are we different than just talking about it?
That's right.
And so it is, you know, being excellent at your work, but, you know, it's also too being available. Like you in Austin, you're a trainer, like you were just available. And I think a lot of times God just needs us to be available.
That's right. That's right. I love the last note about availability, because sometimes I get so caught up in the ROI of everything, like return on investment,
Yep.
right? That's all I'm thinking about. If I put my energy here, what will I get? What will I get? And it's so self-seeking, self-centered, all this glory to self. And I get stuck in this loop like everybody else does. And I realize in my schedule, am I putting time in just to be available for somebody else? And there's been some powerful things I get to witness when even in a workplace setting where I know this has nothing to do with me or my business. I have no equity in it. I have no whatever, right? There's no revenue in it. But I just know that I don't know why, but God has called me to spend time with this individual. I don't know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't even care, because the obedience is, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to be available, and this person will see the excellence of Jesus. And that's all I will do for them. And I think all the things you said, I think the craziest things I've been able to witness is through that, the miracles that you get to just see and the gifts of that. I can't even, like, I don't even know how to express what I witnessed.
Yeah.
And it's just between me and this person.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And then I get to be in that amazing quiet place of Jesus. It's like nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, and no one else will see but just me and them.
Yeah.
And I think that is also a big factor of it too. Like when we think about giving glory to God, like, is it because we want others to see the glory being given? Or is it just we really, really want to glorify God?
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
regardless of if anyone sees, regardless if we even see the outcome.
Wow.
There are some times where we may not even
That's
see
right.
it. And
That's
are
right.
we okay with that?
That's right.
And
That's
I
right.
think,
That's
especially in our city, that's hard. Like, I need to see what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I need
for
to
sure.
see the
Yeah.
fruit, the return. And it's like, we have to get to a point where we are okay walking away knowing that I was obedient, that the seed was planted, and regardless of how I see it watered and come to fruition, I did what I was supposed to do.
Right.
And that's it.
What's up, stewards? So people have been asking us how they can support the podcast, and the best way for you guys to support us is by joining our Patreon. As a subscriber, you're going to get exclusive content such as Q&As, bonus interviews, hot takes, vlogs, and so much more. This show is a labor of love, and we do have financial needs to keep the podcast going. So if you would like to join our Patreon, log on to patreon.com/goodservicepodcast and join our community today. We love and appreciate you so much, stewards. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I think
that's so
that kind of posture for mentorship, like where we're just completely surrendered. It's like, it's not about me seeing the fruit of it. I mean, like, I'm reminded as you're talking, like I'm thinking about my youth pastor, you know, when I was like 14 years old, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, there ain't no fruit there.
yeah, I would say he's the first one in my life that I can remember as far as like a godly man, like kind of like stepping into my life at the time that I needed it. That happened. I was freshman in high school, which was right at the time where my father got shot. And so I was hurting and I was lost, and I was like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know what I needed. And then he just stepped in. And when I think about him, he had to have been, like in his mid-20s. So like he was a kid. And but I looked up to him, and you know, he and his wife just poured into my life. And you know, and then it's been, man, like 30 years since that time, right?
Wow.
And recently, in the last in the last 10 years, I reconnected with him.
Oh, wow.
And
That's awesome.
he had no idea how he's impacted me, because I was like, hey dude, like, I know we haven't spoken in forever. I just would love to like have dinner with you. And you know, speaking of like, you don't know how you're impacting somebody. So when I reconnected with him, he was having a hard time in his life. And you know, he had been burnt in ministry. He stepped out of ministry.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, like, I just want you to know you've impacted my life so much. And like, I started my journey walking with the Lord because of you. And, you know, as a 14, 15-year-old kid, like, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really know if I even had a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
But that was like that first sort of pebble, you know, that in the pond that like created these
The
ripples.
Yeah.
And, you know, most of the conversation, he was just kind of silent, because I was just telling him, like, here's what has happened since then. And
That's wild.
and
dude.
then, you know, he just like messaged me after that dinner, and he was like, you don't know how much I needed to hear that. Because, you know, after like having, you know, impacted me, and he's, you know, obviously lived his life, you know, so many things that have happened that has discouraged him. And he's like, man, like I just praise God because I didn't know that like that was what happened in your life, and that for me to even just be a part of that, like he's like, dude, I'm just so blessed by that. So like, man, the power of like mentorship is crazy.
And just God's timing. Like if you think about that, the fact that you reached out to him 30 years later when you did, in a season of his life that you know nothing about, but God knew.
Right.
And was able to orchestrate that for you to be a blessing to him.
Wow.
And so I think there are so many times that God is trying to orchestrate stuff for other people. And because we are too busy, we're disobedient. And look, I'm guilty. Hey, I get this like urge, like I need you to text this person. I need you to reach out. Okay, I will. And I forget. I like the prompting gets stronger and stronger. I'm like, okay. Like I will. And I forget. And literally like I hear the next day, like, oh, so-and-so is going through this. And I'm like, dang, I missed it. Like I know I missed it. And so it's just us being, again, like obedient to those promptings of like, it's not the grand stage thing that you're doing, but it's literally those promptings, and those are just so monumental that we forget the small tasks that he just wants us to do, not just for ourselves, but for other people. Like he needs us in order to do this work.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't need us. But he wants to use it.
Yeah. He invites us.
He invites us into that.
That's right. And shout out to all the youth pastors out there, man.
Yes.
Seriously, y'all are doing God's work.
Seriously.
Because it is a thankless job. And shout out to just pastors in general, because they're like seed sowers, right? But they're not always there to pick the fruits.
Yeah.
You know, they don't get to harvest all of that. They meet hundreds to thousands of people thankless. So shout out to all the pastors out there doing y'all thing. We love y'all. We love y'all.
So like for those who are curious about like being involved in the work that you guys are doing, like what are some practical ways that you guys help and mentor like budding entrepreneurs in that space?
It's budding entrepreneurs and really anyone in the marketplace. And so that could be corporate, that could be nonprofit space, tech, like any industry. We want to have an impact. And so what that looks like is, you know, we have an 8-month cohort program that's actually launching in January, and we're really excited about.
Dope.
And it's launching in Los Angeles. The work has been happening for the past decade across the globe. And so, it's an 8-month cohort program, January to August. That includes teaching sessions. It includes one-on-one mentorship. So each participant is paired up with someone in their industry.
Wow.
And then I really love this piece of it too, is their gospel action plan. And so they're required to take what they're learning in addition to maybe what God has placed on their heart and start a tangible next step of what God would have them do to impact their environment, Los Angeles, the world, etc. So just if they want to be a part of the cohort, they can hit me up. And then we have opportunities for people who want to be mentors, who are like, hey, like I've been through that journey of being in the workplace and being a Christian, and this is how I've navigated it. And I think too, like one of the things that I like about Resource Global is it's individuals as mentors and speakers who have amassed, I mean, some really great success in their field.
That's great.
Whether it's sports, whether it's, you know, tech, etc., and being able to give back because they see the value of what God has done in their journey, in their work.
That's great.
Plenty of opportunities. Would love to connect with anyone who wants to.
Is this exclusively for Christians?
You know,
good question.
Good question. I would say yes and.
Yes and.
Yes,
yes
and. What do you mean
yes
by that?
Yes and. Yes, it's for Christians. in the marketplace. However, I feel like if there are people who are wanting development and leadership and, are open to the gospel.
There it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you guys find the people? Like where
word of mouth?
Yeah.
Word of mouth, connections through the other resource global connections, churches,
podcasts.
There you go.
Podcasts. Really anywhere.
I will say I love just any type of opportunities with good people doing good foundational mentorship. And there's a couple things that I've been taught about just mentors in general from good mentors. They always say to have someone in front of you, behind you, and next to you, because it really keeps you on that path. And it just really surrounds you with that protection of like, hey, you are moving, you are progressing, like we talked about on the other pod. And I really found that to be absolutely true.
Yeah.
I think the most years that I've been like sober-minded, moving forward, having progress is when I was surrounded by this community that was with someone in front of me, behind me, and next to me.
Yeah.
There's so much power in that. And then another thing that I will say is if for those that are listening that are going to join this amazing group one day and looking for mentorship in general, one thing I've been taught is what's tough is, I'm not going to point at any generation. I'm not going to say it's because today's generation or whatever. I don't want to sound like that person. But mentorship, I was taught that if I want mentoring, I'm the one that chases them. And there's power in that because as a young buck coming up, I've made so many mistakes, and I would definitely, and in those mistakes when I was younger, I really thought I knew everything. And that was the most painful lessons every time I felt that, you know? And so to really start working on that ego, if I saw someone of any caliber that had something I wanted, I had to chase that. Yeah. And it was my duty to be the one chasing that mentorship. So for those that are looking, make sure you remember those things. And there's going to be some great success waiting for you.
Yeah.
Hey stewards, we all need prayer, so we're excited to announce our partnership with Seedling. Seedling is an online platform for churches, content creators, and different ministries to connect to their communities through the power of prayer. There'll be real people on the other side, like myself and Ben. We're also logged on. We'll be there to intercede for you through voice and through text. Please log on to seedling.so so we can get connected through prayer. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
What would be some advice that you would give to, let's just say the younger generation who might be a little lost or, just trying to find their way?
Yeah. I think, and part of this is just thinking back to like my own journey early on after post-college. I think often we try to seek purpose in positions. Like, the purpose will come if I get the position.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, okay.
And it's not the case. You can feel fulfilled if you're operating in purpose through that position, but the position itself is not the purpose. And so I think being able to think through or think ahead of like, what is God calling me to? How has he gifted me? And what are the ways that he wants me to express that in this season? Just because it's expressed one way in a season may not be how it's expressed in another season. Yeah. Right? So one of the things that I believe God has called me to is like speaking. And so one of the expressions of that earlier on was, doing like early, like kid early. But I knew it was kind of the general gifting was like speaking, and I would do like these poetry things, and I would do these like, plays and acting. Like I grew up acting, singing, dancing. So like that was kind of my journey. And for a minute, like that's what I always thought the expression of me using my voice was. Speed up, post-college, nonprofit. Now I'm using that same gifting being expressed as a speaker for a nonprofit that goes into schools talking about sexual health. Never thought about that. Didn't necessarily want that expression. But it was where he had me at the moment. Speed, more years. Now I'm like teaching about missions and teaching individuals about cultivating a lifestyle of missions. So I think we have to be okay with God changing maybe the expression of the gifting. But still being mindful of like what he's called us to and how he's called us to do it. I think if I would have kept that in mind earlier on, I probably wouldn't have been so frustrated and wouldn't have tried to search for positions that have nothing to do with the gifting or you know the purpose that he's had me on. So that would be my advice.
Dude.
Dang.
I think that was for me. Like, no, that really ministers to me, to be like totally honest with you. Like, I'm in a place where currently I'm kind of like, God, I used to do this, and that was what I thought my purpose was, like the thing that I was doing. And I'm realizing like the things will evolve, the things will change. And when you put so much emphasis on the thing and you're not thinking about like, God, what was my gifting to even do that thing? Then you can kind of like lose sight of like what God is showing you as far as like that thing will go with you wherever you go. It's not the position, it's not the actual job per se, but it's who you are and why, what you were doing there in the first place. And I think that's something that God is showing me, like you got to look deeper than like the actual thing. Like it's what you actually have and what you have a passion for. And I think for me, my passion has always been people. It's always been loving people, creating community. And even though like I was doing that in dance for so long, I thought like, well, dance is the thing that I have to do forever. I'm like, well, you're not going to do that forever. You know what I mean? I mean, truth is, no one does anything forever. We're always going to move and evolve from thing to thing. So I think that's something that is so important. And like, it's a reminder to me now too, because I am in transition, that like God can use, you know, my love for people in every space that I enter. So like, that's so good. Thank you for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Charity, we called this show Good Service. You know, we go to these amazing food establishments that provide good food, good service, which creates a good experience. That's why we keep coming back to these places. Shout out to the Toss Up for these amazing salads today. But good service can mean different things to different people, good and service. So what does good service mean to you, Charity?
Good service. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we talked about. Like, I think being obedient to serve in general, like just being available, being obedient, like those acts of service that God is calling us to, whether we think they're important or not, like obviously if he's telling us to do it, it's important. And just the excellence that comes along with that. You know, like it could be helping someone, I don't know, helping a friend do whatever. Like I want to do and give the best of the best in that. You know,
it's good.
I want to give it my 1,000%, whatever it is that I'm doing. So I think to me, like that's what good service is just being available, being obedient, and doing whatever it is that is being asked of you extremely well.
It's good.
I love that you said that if God's calling you to do it, it's important.
That's good.
We think, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes I feel like, oh God, that's so small. Like that's like not a big thing. And yeah, that's, you know, that's my pride in like, I define what I think is big or important. Like you even talking about like you get a prompting to call somebody or text somebody. It's like, is that not important just to like call somebody or text somebody? Like it that may be the thing that person needs, you know what I'm saying? So I love that you emphasize that if God's calling you to it, it's important.
That challenged me actually a lot more than I realized when she said it. Because like when you said that, I thought about every small thing I don't want to do. Like every single thing, tiny, that I deem. Because honestly, as a dad with kids at home, with an amazing wife that's patient, sometimes I'll think this silly thing at work supersedes this tiny thing at home. And I felt so convicted by that right now. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it's not easy. Like it is easier said than done to literally stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
And to do whatever it is that he's prompting us to do.
Yeah.
But how many times did people try to stop him to get their healing? And he stopped. Who touched the hem of my garment? He stopped in the middle of going X place.
Yeah.
And so that, again, is another example of like, oh, if Jesus can stop,
wow,
I can stop too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can stop what I'm doing to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Leaving space for interruption. Like letting yourself be like, I need space to be interrupted. Like it's not all about me getting to where I need to go.
That's so good.
But being sensitive to like be interrupted, because that might be the thing that someone else, that might be the thing that you need to be interrupted. You know what I mean? Like it's not about like I got my agenda. It's like maybe that's not what you need. You know what I mean? I think sometimes you need to kind of have that break where you let the Lord show you something that you weren't expecting.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So man, that's so good.
And just being open.
Yeah,
man,
that's
like
really
just
good.
being open to receive, but also being open to like, Lord, at any given time, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like you can use me how you see fit, but I'm also open to receive, because that could also be, a challenge. Is like I'm always on to give, but not to receive. And God wants to also meet us where we are in the midst of, our day, etc. And so thinking through, what does that look like practically, of like you said, building time in. And this is something that I am really working on. I am a go-getter, agenda packed. I'm trying to fit 10 things into one day to get it done.
Yeah.
And I'm like slowly, I won't say reluctantly, but just slowly like chipping things away at building in extra time into my schedule for these moments of not rushing. Like when we're rushing, we can't even think and hear God because we're like rushing to get someplace. What does it look like to travel without rushing and hear as we are driving or etc.?
It's good.
So,
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of receiving, like what is a way that we or our listening audience can serve you in this season?
Definitely through prayer, praying for Resource Global and our upcoming launch. I'm also launching a physical baby out of me.
That's right.
I am launching
very
a
pregnant.
physical baby out of. She's the first pregnant guest
big
on
launch.
the pod, I believe, and we will bless the launch.
Yes.
So just praying for those two things. And
how can people follow the journey, you personally, and what Resource Global is doing?
So you can do Resource Global, period. And then Resource Global LAX for our local page. And then people can follow me at The Lovely Charity, TheLuvly Charity. And be updating on both. And
we'll plug all that in the show caption.
Yes.
Charity, thank you so much for hanging with us, breaking bread with us, breaking greens with us.
I've been looking forward to it.
Thank you.
This little piece of bread right here, man.
Oh, there you go. One piece of bread. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Good Service. We'll catch you guys on the next one. We out of here. Peace. Stewards, thank you so much for supporting Good Service. People have been asking us how you can support the pod. We have a Patreon.
Yes, if you guys go on there, there's additional content. We're going to be doing Q&As, different announcements, and other types of special things just for our tight community. So thank you guys for supporting us on Patreon.
Please subscribe. We love you guys. Peace,
Jeez.
stewards.